All right, boys and girls and children of all ages, welcome to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. We are now approaching week 2 of the preseason. The Saints will be playing the Arizona Cardinals Friday night in the Superdome. But first, we're going to continue our journey through the NFC South. We've had the Carolina Panthers and we've had the Atlanta Falcons on. Now we're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But first, I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, with my partner over there, Sean Williams. How you doing tonight, Sean?
Doing great, man. Doing great. We want to thank, as always, we want to thank our sponsors, the Fan First Productions, for being a part of what we do. We want to invite you guys to subscribe to iTunes and to YouTube, to our channel, where you can be a part of what we do even more. And without any further ado, I want to take the opportunity to introduce not just a very, very good man at what he does following the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but also someone that I really consider myself blessed to call a good and true friend. From the BUC What You Heard podcast, of which I've been a guest many, many times and always had fun being on there, we want to welcome in Gene Thomas. Gene, how are you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me on. It's a pleasure. I love talking football. This is my time of the year now. We've gotten past all the dead months. We've gotten past free agency and the draft, and we're ready to roll now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, captain of the ship. Man, this is our show, and we don't even have captions under our pictures.
I'm telling you, we look horrible compared to that.
We got to a professional.
We'll talk off air. We'll get you straight.
Man, dude is a guest and has a spit screen over his microphone. Come on. we have got to up our game a little bit.
I'm telling you.
Gene, how did you guys look in your preseason debut? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you guys went to Miami the other night.
Yeah.
How did you come out?
Hey, I was glad to actually see them in Miami, considering last year the hurricane situation. So it was really nice to actually get a game in. So for me, just watching the game, I really didn't get to see enough of the first team, but the first team did good. You had a touchdown in the red zone, so I was happy about that. This is the first game of preseason, so there's a lot of evaluation that goes into this, and that's kind of what you look at. You want to look at your rookies and the free agent acquisitions that you have, and you want to see how everybody's starting to gel. And this is the first look that we've had at it, so I was pleasantly surprised with what I saw.
Okay, let's back things up just a little bit. We're going back to late December, early January. The 2017 season ends, and I believe you guys finished the season with 5 wins, correct?
Yeah, 5 wins.
Okay.
That is correct.
First, and this is something that oddly enough you and I haven't talked about. Were you at all surprised that Cutter was not relieved of his duties after last season?
I was really glad he wasn't. I don't know if you've just kind of followed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers throughout the years. You've noticed that there have been coaches that have come in. After John Gruden, you had Raheem Morris. And after one bad season, Raheem Morris was relieved of his duties. Then you had Greg Schiano. Greg Schiano came in. And after a whole bunch of different incidents, he was relieved of his duties. Then you have Lovie Smith that comes in. And, because they're not going in the right direction, he's relieved of his duties. You really need some sense of consistency in order to build something or even identify whether you're on the right track or not. So the fact that they kept the general manager and the head coach, and I know a lot of people don't like him, but this will be the season to tell if he's the right guy for the job with all the new acquisitions that they have.
Did you want Chucky back?
No. Okay. Not at all. Not even a little bit. I'm enjoying what the Raiders are experiencing, and it's going to really come to light once the regular season starts.
Well, okay. You can. Well, I can agree with that. I mean, here's the thing. It's pretty much been common knowledge that Chucky won basically with Tony Dungy's players, and he got his dream opponent in the Super Bowl. I mean, he was coaching against the very team he just left the year before, and he knew everything Rich Gannon was going to run. You know, the famous footage of him running the crossing pattern offense, the quick drops. He told them over and over and over again what they were going to do.
Let me jump in here real quick. I'm noticing, I hear a lot of people talk about Tony Dungy's team. There were a lot of free agents that Rich McKay and John Gruden brought in that put that team over the top in a manner of speaking. If you go back and look at the free agents, and I don't have it off my head, there were a lot of pieces that they didn't have that I felt put them in a good position to win. Because when you got into the playoffs and you're facing the Philadelphia Eagles, who they had so many problems throughout the earlier years beating them in the playoffs, and to go in and close down the dump the way they did and then go into the Super Bowl, I thought that, those players there were a lot of key players, Joe Jurevicius, Keenan McCardell.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pieces in there that we don't really talk about. Michael Pittman, Ricky Dudley, a lot of guys that weren't on that Tony Dungy team that were brought in, and they were able to get that accomplished. So I understand what you're saying, and I see both sides of it, because a huge argument was this Tony Dungy's team that went to the Super Bowl. It's kind of a mix of both, but you could even go back as far as Sam Weish, head coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when they brought Warren Sapp and some of the other Hall of Fame players. And the one guy that nobody really mentions a lot is Rich McKay. Rich McKay was there from the Sam Weish era all the way to Gruden, or before Bruce Allen came in. So he doesn't get enough credit, but we could go on and on about that.
Well, what I was going to say, though, and of course you're absolutely right, but what I was going to say was what you saw after those players began to age, and especially on the offensive side, you saw the revolving door of quarterbacks. You saw the revolving door of offensive players. It's like he could never be satisfied with what he had. He didn't want to build anything. He was always after the next trinket, the next toy that he needed. He thought he needed in that offense to get going.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm right there with you. I look at some of the moves that he's made since he's been in Oakland, and I'm just gonna sit back and watch. We'll see what happens.
Well, I think it's. Let me see what kind of philosophical word can I use? Asinine. that the first name that you see thrown out on the trading block is Khalil Mack.
Yes.
That I don't know. I think maybe I might be a little more inclined to kind of hang on to a Khalil Mack and maybe let that 17th string wide receiver go at a discount price. No, I think that the Gruden to the Raiders, the entire situation was destined to failure from the very beginning, because you got him going to basically a 2-year lame duck franchise that has no home. They're moving to a new place that has never had NFL football before, but has plenty of other distractions to take away from at the very least, the attendance of an NFL game. Once the new wears off of NFL in Las Vegas, it's just going to be just another attraction to fit in with the thousands upon thousands of other attractions there in that city. And that's all on the outside remote possibility that there's not some sort of gambling implications that make their way into affect the Raider organization. That's just something that is a pathway to doom, I'm afraid.
Yeah, there's so many unknowns there.
Hey, I'm just saying that the NFL cannot wait to have a Super Bowl in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
They are going to love having a Super Bowl in Las Vegas. That is going to be a media frenzy. So,
NHL is any indication. I believe it's going to be a success just based on what they've done with that NHL team that they have over in Las Vegas.
Right.
Well,
and
Las Vegas is pretty close to you, though, isn't it, Gene?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about a 5-hour drive.
Oh, my Lord.
There you go. Okay, so the Bucs. Let's go back to the current time. We've been talking about the Bucs and the Raiders. We forget about the show for a while, but the Bucs made two big moves in free agency and in the draft. In free agency, they brought in to augment the pass rush. They made the trade and brought in Jason Pierre-Paul, and then they further cemented that defensive line with their first-round draft pick, bringing in. I hope I don't butcher this man's name. Vita Vey. Thank you. I still messed it up. Vita Vey. So you've got. Well, I'm famous for butchering names. So now you've got Jason Pierre-Paul, Vita Vey, and Gerald McCoy in this defensive line. How much better should we expect to see that front four of the Buccaneers compared to last year's 5-11 team?
Basically, you're looking at a totally different defensive line. I mean, with the addition of Brinson Buckner coming in as defensive line coach now, then you bring in a Bo Allen from the Philadelphia Eagles. You bring in a Mitch Unrein from the Chicago Bears, both great run stoppers. That was a huge problem that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had last year, stopping the run. There were games they should have won, but were unable to win because they were unable to stop the run. When you look at a Vinny Curry, another defensive end from the champion Philadelphia Eagles brought in, this is a totally different defensive line that you're looking at compared to what you're looking at last year. You had Robert Ayers, you had Chris Baker, guys that, in my opinion, Chris Baker really didn't want to be in Tampa. It just happened to be the money was right, and he came and he showed by his actions that he didn't want to be there, just based on the way he played. And from things that I've heard, he was somewhat of a cancer in the locker room. So just removing that kind of influence will definitely point your team in the right direction. So I look at, Ryan Jensen, the center from the Ravens coming in now to help the offensive line. And we can get to that later, but they've put a lot of emphasis on that defensive line just because they know that it wasn't what it should have been last year. Okay,
so let's talk a little bit about the offense then, and then we'll get to Sean's question, which is the elephant in the room. But let's look at the offensive changes because last year the hope was they could build a rushing attack and really be able to run the ball like they haven't been able to run the ball in a while. It didn't happen that way. So how much better is this offense going to be? Oh, and then, of course, in the receiving core, you thought you'd have a good tall possession receiver in Mike Evans. And then Jackson was supposed to be your speed threat. And that never really materialized. So how much better is this offense going to be?
I think when you look at that 5-win season last year, it humbled a lot of players. A lot of players were looking at this as, we've got Hard Knocks here. We've got the cameras here. All the national media was talking about Tampa was, going to go to the playoffs. And the way they looked at this team, this was supposed to be the surprise team in the NFC South. It didn't materialize. And I think that right there in itself kind of helped people reevaluate what they needed to do in 2018. We look at, I know you mentioned Deshaun Jackson. I look at Deshaun Jackson as the chemistry was not there. You've got a guy as fast as Deshaun Jackson is, and there were so many times that 5 yards, 2 yards, 3 yards misses, overthrows or underthrows. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Jameis Winston came into the league in 2015, and if you talk to any Bucs fan, that was a bad year for Mike Evans because those guys didn't have the chemistry that they needed to be successful. 2016, they turned it around. They worked together. They worked on their chemistry, and everything seemed to work out a lot better for them just based on that. And that alone, they really improved in that 2016 season. As we know, that was the Bucs' first winning season since 2010. So they worked on that, and they fixed the problem. And in this offseason, you saw Deshaun Jackson working a lot more with both Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick and improving the chemistry there. And a year removed is always going to give you more of an advantage, based on the first year. So I have very high expectations that Deshaun Jackson is going to have a definitely better year than what you saw last year if he can stay healthy.
Okay. Well, that's Sean. Go ahead with your question. I know you've been waiting to ask it.
Y'all have always paint me as the harbinger of doom and the doo-doo stirrer.
I like the
word. Okay, well, being completely professional and fair, we cannot discuss, and we talked about this off air, we cannot discuss the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and their prospect and prospective season without talking about Jameis Winston and the impending 3-game suspension, which will cover, in the interest of this show, it will cover the first meeting between our two teams on opening Sunday. And I just I want to ask you a couple of questions in regards to this entire situation. First and foremost, and I realize just exactly how big of a spitball spectrum that this is going to include, but how is it looking like this suspension with Winston is going to affect you guys long term in the interest of trying to be competitive in a playoff race in the most competitive division in football in the NFC South?
Okay, well, I can start the beginning of that. The first 3 games, you have the Saints, you have the Steelers, and you have the Eagles. We have they brought back Ryan Fitzpatrick, who actually played for Jameis with his shoulder injury last year, and he was 2-1. So he knows the system, and the defense is better than what it was on paper. Again, remains to be seen. We'll as the preseason goes on, we'll get a better idea of what we have on, or what this team has on defense as we go along. But going back to Ryan Fitzpatrick is very comfortable in this system. Just looking at him in camp, looking at some of the video of him hitting his receivers, he looks very comfortable. It looks like the players respect him, and he's able to command the huddle. So I think this was going to work out very well for Tampa. I couldn't have asked for that. Based on who's out on the street right now, couldn't ask for a better quarterback for the next 3 games. So that right there is where we are with those 3 games. After that, when Jameis comes back, Jameis will have to ball out. I'm going to put it that way. Jameis would be, in order to be considered for him to come back to Tampa again, he will have to play lights out, and that's just end all be all right now. This team has been building since Jason Light got here in 2014. Yeah. They've been building this team. When Jason Light got here, the cupboard was bare on both sides of the ball. No real talent to speak of on either side, with the exception of Levante David, Gerald McCoy. So, very few pieces that you could carry over into another regime, but they've just kind of rebuilt from there. But where we are right now, as a fan base and just in general, it's time for this team to start winning. No more time for excuses. It's time for this team to turn things around. They've made moves. They made significant moves in free agency. They made significant moves in the draft. And so it's just at a point right now, Jameis Winston, no more excuses for, bad play or mismanagement of the ball. And, he has to go out there and show that he is the franchise quarterback that he was drafted to be.
Would it be safe to say that this is Jameis Winston's last stand then as a Bucs quarterback? If he fails this year, will they be looking at next year moving on from him?
I could definitely see that happening. It's about winning. It's about getting butts in the seats. And when you don't have a winning product, you need to fix what you can to get a winning product. And I've been a huge Jameis Winston supporter since day one. To me, it wouldn't have mattered whether it's Mariota or Jameis Winston. Either guy would have been the quarterback here. I would have been very supportive of either one. I don't really have a dog in the race. I'm all about wins and losses here. So just him, I would love for him to succeed. I'd love for him to come back and have a successful season. I think with the pieces that they've got in place on offense, the improvement on the offensive line, he's got all the tools that he needs to be successful. And we haven't talked about the tight ends or all the wide receivers that he has. And again, there are just so many different tools that he has to be successful that it's just pretty much up to him how the rest of the season goes when he comes back.
Well, you definitely got a good tight end over there. Somebody I wish the Saints had. The Alabama tight end, O.J.
Howard.
O.J. Howard, thank you. I kept wanting to say O.J. Anderson. I'm like, no, that was the Giants running back. I just could not remember his name.
A lot of people overlook Cameron Brate, who is
I had Cameron Brate in fantasy football last year, and I had 2 games where it came down to his performance, whether I won or lost, and I won both times.
Yeah, and he's a guy that just gets overlooked a lot of times, but
he does is just keeps working.
Yes, hard worker.
Yeah.
Kind of getting back to O.J. Howard, just watching him block. The guy he's a defensive coordinator nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to game plan for him because he's fast and he's physical. He can block and he has really nice hands. So he's somebody I expect to see the Bucs using him a lot more. Another wide receiver that we haven't talked about is Chris Godwin, who another name you guys really need to think about is Chris Godwin and what he will be bringing to this offense this season as well.
Well, as I look back at last year's season with the Buccaneers, I think there was about a 3-game stretch where the entire season pretty much unraveled for Tampa, and that was in October. 3 close losses: the Patriots, followed by the Cardinals, and then the Buffalo Bills, which I saw the Buffalo Bills ending, and that game was a very bizarre ending. If I remember right, did it go to overtime? I think it either went to overtime or threatened to go to overtime, but they lost that game 27-30, if I remember right.
Right, and the thing that frustrated me the most, they couldn't stop the run.
Yeah,
and there were so many plays that basic wrap up, tackle, and got to get out. Wrap up, tackle, you've got to get out, and it just didn't. And again, if you look at that defense, you cannot compare that defensive line to what you're seeing in 2018. That's the one thing that you guys are astute at looking at film and stuff like that. I want you guys to keep that in mind when you're watching this team this season. And they're going to fly under the radar to 31 teams because everybody's looking at that 5-win season last year. But you're looking at a totally different defensive line.
You've got 2 offenses though with Atlanta and New Orleans like to throw the ball around a lot. How much better do you think that secondary will be because of that defensive line?
With a strong defensive line, I like the term sacks are sexy. Getting pressure on the quarterback is even more important than getting sacks, or not. I wouldn't say as more important. If you get them, that's good. But keeping your opposing quarterback uncomfortable is important. That's something that you want to do. That's going to help your secondary. That's going to help your linebacker core and your safeties. I look at the draft, and there's some guys that I'm really, really focused on this year. MJ Stewart and Carlton Davis, the 2 second-round picks from Auburn and North Carolina. I'm really excited about them and what they're bringing to the secondary. So young guys, but I believe that they'll be able to fit in and really help the secondary to improve.
We had a young guy last year.
Lattimore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, if you really want to get technical, we had 2 young guys last year, and they both grew up.
Yeah.
And while I enjoyed the success that the New Orleans Saints had, as Alan and I have alluded to on this show several times, whenever you make a winning season / playoff run, and Gene, you know this as well, there's so much that goes into that, so much more than just football. The ball has to bounce the right way. You throw a pass down the middle of the field and it's tipped. It's tipped to your team instead of over here to the defensive back who picks it off. There's just so much that goes into that. And the Saints were beneficiaries of a few lucky breaks last year. That 8-game winning streak in the middle of the season didn't hurt. Arguably the best draft class in the history of this franchise the year before. That certainly didn't hurt. But the Saints are going to be looking to double down and one up the divisional round of the playoffs. What should they fear the most when they look down and see Tampa Bay on the schedule?
If they're expecting the 5-win team they saw last year, they're definitely going to be surprised. Again, I can't stress this enough. Just looking at on the defensive side of the ball, with the exception of the linebacker core, you're Kendall Beckwith, Levante David, and Quan Alexander. You know about those LSU boys down there. They're despite those guys, that defensive line is greatly improved. JPP is just a huge upgrade considering what Tampa had in the on the defensive end side of the ball. So again, this defense is not going to be something where they're going to be able to impose their will very easily, just based on what I've seen so far. And they're just continuing to get better. And there will be scary once they gel. If they do gel, they'll definitely be scary. Just consider these are all guys that the majority of these guys have never played together before, and they're all coming together. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Well, I've told you before, if I'm not mistaken, it was the last time I was on with you guys. Atlanta, that's a blood feud. If they were on fire, I would not put the fire out.
Social media, the Falcons and the Saints were going at it, and who was it?
Ocho Cinco.
Ocho Cinco chimed in on it. He just noticed. But this is nothing new. You guys it's a blood feud basically.
But the one team the Panthers and the Saints, they usually give one and take one in the course of a season. More oftentimes than not, you're going to win one, you're going to lose one when it comes to the Panthers, except for last year. Anyway, the team that I always dread playing in the NFC South is always the Buccaneers. Because if you think about it over recent history, say the past 5-10 seasons, they always play each other tough. Drew Brees, if he's going to have a meltdown and have a bad game, it's going to be against Tampa Bay. He's going to throw 3 picks, generally to the same defensive back. Anyway.
But again, the Saints have pretty much owned Tampa for years. I mean, just as far as the wins losses go, but yeah, there have been some really close games. As a matter of fact, that last game of the season was And I wanted to ask you guys about this. That last game of the season, did the Saints, were they playing for something? I mean, or were they resting players? Or
no,
they mentally checked out of that game about midway through the third quarter. It looked like because they couldn't do much more than what they were doing. When that game started, they had the potential of getting that second seed, but I think it kind of certain teams won. Yeah,
somebody
teams
played
won
before us, and if
yes.
they won, it
yes.
knocked us out.
Yeah,
and about halftime, maybe a little after, that team had actually gone ahead and won their games. So anything that we had to play for, basically was out the window, whether we won or lost, either way.
Yeah, and I believe Carolina was beating Atlanta, too, at the same time. I think they were scoreboard watching that because they didn't know who they were going to play the following week in the wild card round. So I'm not quite sure what exactly happened in that game, but it looked like the Saints mentally checked out, especially in that last drive of the fourth quarter for Tampa. It was like they were treating that like a preseason game. They weren't tackling. They weren't really covering. It was a very bizarre scenario, and they ended up losing the game. And as a famous, a lot of people made a big deal about the way Sean Payton shook hands with Cutter at the end of the game. Kind of like, Jim Harbaugh and what was that Detroit Lions coach again?
Oh, yeah.
Schwartz.
Yeah. It was, Sean Payton kind of smacked him a little hard and shook his hand, and, Cutter kind of grabbed him and pulled him forward.
That was the game before, though.
That was the last game.
That was the last game. And I think it was because Payton was so aggravated with his team because he gave a very terse press conference after that. And I think Cutter just kind of...
I thought that awkward handshake was after the Jameis Winston, Mike Evans incident in the Superdome.
That was different. That was different. This was actually, there was two different times there because the blowout. I remember that game, and this was different. And
that was the only hit of consequence that Devontae Harris had his entire career in New Orleans.
Well, that was because that was after the fight in the on the sideline when Winston pushed the back of Marshawn Lattimore's helmet, and Cutter said he didn't see anything.
Harris come off the sidelines and blindsided Mike Evans, and as luck would have it, now they're teammates.
Yeah.
By the way, if you have rental property in Tampa Bay, don't rent to Harris. I'm just saying. Harris was a good player to a point, but they needed him to exceed that point far more than he was apparently able to. I think Devontae Harris was probably made an example out of in that first preseason game the other night. 2 red zone penalties that were really, really unnecessary.
That's because he got beat. He
panicked. He panicked. And he got one was a holding penalty, which was simply 5 yards. It didn't give him the automatic first down. But had that been in a seasonal situation, that would have been a first down inside of the 2-minute warning, and could have been detrimental to win.
Let me ask you this, and just kind of curious. Do you see him as somebody that could have potentially made this team and eventually fought to be a starter at some point?
No, he had his chance last year. Yeah. Here's the thing. Yeah. Devontae Harris and Ken Crawley both were undrafted free agents in 2015. I'm sorry, 2016. And actually, Devontae Harris played better than Ken Crawley in 2016. And then in the offseason, going to the 2017 season, Ken Crawley got better, and Devontae Harris had plateaued from his rookie season. So even though Harris started the first 2 games of the year, Crawley was clearly the better cornerback. Crawley got the start and as a week 3, and Harris quickly found himself back on the practice squad. So I think this past year, where they were hoping, they kept him around enough to see if he would eventually mature, and he just never did. And so they got some young kids. We had one of them on our show earlier this year, Arthur Millette. He is having a fantastic camp. I think he passed up Harris a while back. And
is it possible that it could be a change of scenery that is needed, or
it could be. To me, it very easily could be that.
Yeah,
you look at the prime example of that is P-Rob.
Yep.
When he was here, there was a price on his head among the fan base in New Orleans. He left here. He went to, I think, 2 other stops before getting to Philadelphia, and he comes back. I watched him play against Jacksonville the other night. It's like it's a completely different player. Sometimes making it to that level is the goal. And then but for those that want to be better than that, that's never the goal. Getting there is just a step towards the goal.
And sometimes,
go ahead.
I was say sometimes too, it's a defensive philosophy. The Saints like to put their cornerbacks on an island. Their safeties kind of play more of a zone. You have a single high safety. You've got one safety down in the box. If they go to a 3 safety look, you might have 2 safeties set up high and one drops down low. Anything like that. But the point is the corners really play by themselves, man-to-man press coverage. And if you're not a physical corner, if you're not a fast corner, if you can't open your hips up quickly and turn and run with somebody, it's hard to succeed in the Saints system. I don't know what kind of system Tampa is using. He may turn out to be a very good player in Tampa because they may run a system that better fits his skills. He may be more of a zone corner, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were looking at too, because that's what Mike Smith tends to lean towards, is that that zone system. I see he's got players that are physically capable of playing that man press, but they play 5, 6, 7 yards off. Mm-hmm. So again, this may be something that could benefit him. So basically, he does have the tools, in your opinion. He does have the tools to be successful. It's just he hasn't put it all together as an NFL player to be successful.
Exactly. A lot of it is here. A lot of it is there.
And something else that we're not exactly speaking to, but we all three know is very much a reality in this business. He has intimate knowledge of the enemy.
Yeah.
We bring players in here all the time for that, just like every other team in this league does.
Sure.
In the skills department, I don't think that Harris is by any means deficient. He got to this level,
right?
And it's not everybody is good when you get here. It's only the ones that are better than good that are going to rise above the good players at this level. I believe that Harris could be a good player, but he's got, as we've been discussing, it's going to have to be the right situation. It's going to have to be the right timing. And
again, I'm not looking for a Pro Bowler. I'm just looking for guys. Are these guys going to come in and contribute and help this team win games? And that's to me what it should come down to. So hopefully he gets that chance to do that.
Heck, Malcolm Jenkins was rated in 2012 as part of the worst safety tandem in the NFL. He and Roman Harper. He goes over to Philadelphia and becomes a All-Pro, a Pro Bowler, and a Super Bowl champion over there. So, I mean, It's just one of those things that, yes, it's change of scenery, responsibility, how you use them. And sometimes players look at it and go, you know what? I got one shot left. If I get cut from one more team, I'm now a greeter at Walmart. So I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm like the old player, like the old guy from On the Waterfront, the movie On the Waterfront. I could have been a contender.
There you go.
You go from asking, "Do you want me to go high?" to asking, "Do you want fries with that order?"
There you go.
Gene, what's been the biggest? What would you consider to be the biggest surprise in Tampa during this off-season process?
In the off season, there's a couple of things that stick out to me. Going into the draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had that number 1 pick, and number 7 pick in the first round, and for them to turn that into all the players that they were able to draft, it says a lot about the general manager and what he was able to accomplish. That right there kind of stuck out to me first. And then I think about how they got a 3rd round pick. They gave up a 3rd round pick for Jason Pierre-Paul to bring him into Tampa to help that defensive line. Again, just everything that I've seen from him in camp, this guy is definitely going to be a huge improvement over what Tampa has had since going back to Michael Bennett, maybe. That's just off the top of my head. You can keep in mind, Tampa hasn't had a double-digit sack person since Simeon Rice, so who, by the way, should be in the Hall of Fame, but he's not. But I have to get that out there every chance I get. But just kind of going back, just what general manager was able to accomplish with the little resources that he had. That was a big surprise for me. Secondly, and the biggest one for me are the 2 cornerbacks. I was not expecting a whole lot from these guys, and just how aggressive they've been in camp, and it's contagious for some of the other secondary players, and it's really pushing them to play better than what they have been. The Bucs had a lot of guys that were just playing by default because of all the injuries they had. So just bringing in competition, it's really changed things around, and just these young guys are hungry and they want to get out there and play. So definitely keep an eye on MJ Stewart and Carlton Banks.
Well, I've got a player to ask about, because this was somebody going back to the draft. I want to say, what was it, 2016 maybe? I'm trying to find his name. Noah
Spence.
Noah Spence, thank you. He was a popular player being mocked to the Saints in the 2nd round last year, or in 2016. I believe that's when he was drafted. But he was a popular player being mocked to the Saints, and the Bucs ended up getting him. What is going on with him? What's going to happen with him with these new additions? Is he kind of being pushed out of the scheme, or
not at all? This guy, his inside, he's worked his inside moves. He's put on a little bit more weight. Let's hopefully he can stay healthy. That's just been the only issue, has just been staying healthy with the shoulder. But when he's on the field, he's healthy and he's able to play. He's hard to guard. He's hard to stop. Once he's got a fast first step, and it's incredible to watch him. The game film that I've got to watch when he's healthy, he can cause problems for a lot of people. So he's somebody that they can rotate in. They're not having to force him in and put a lot of pressure on him to play. He's somebody that they can bring in different situations and get used out of him. And he's another guy I have very high expectations about this year. If he can stay healthy, I see him being a huge part of this Buccaneers defense.
Okay. Well, that was one of the big questions I wanted to have answered. For some people asking me that, is he on the way out in Tampa because of a change in philosophy or anything like that? So,
this guy is, his talent, his ceiling is still, he's nowhere even close to. He's kind of been held back by injury. And he's put on this extra weight, and he's still fast, and he's learning techniques. And again, you have a Brent Buckner that comes in, and his philosophy is learning from the neck up, and that's the key right there, is having that mental aspect of the game. As you later on in the season, being able to play through injuries, and just as the season progresses, I think that that's been a big influence on a lot of these defensive linemen, and I have very high expectations for him as well.
Okay.
Moving back over the past, it seems like forever now. It's Tampa Bay has always, the offense, even with Jameis Winston and Mike Evans, Tampa Bay's offense has always moved at a pace that was generally cut by Doug Martin. How does this team move on from a Doug Martin?
I think it was good to move on from Doug Martin. Peyton Barber, who was the second string running back last year. He was the second string running back last year, and he was very effective when he was used. Now, the coaching staff wanted to give Doug Martin every opportunity to succeed. So there were times where they were giving him the ball. It could have easily gone to a Peyton Barber who was successful in the run. And again, just continually working on that offensive line, opening up holes. I think he's another guy to kind of watch for. Him and also Ronald Jones, the running back out of USC. I have he's a rookie, so my expectations for him are a little bit lower, only because he's a rookie. If he is successful, that's good, but if not, I wouldn't expect a whole lot out of him until mid-season, later on in the season, or maybe so he will definitely be contributing, but I think a lot of this position right now is Peyton Barber's to lose.
What happened to Doug Martin? I mean, that was the question a lot of NFC South announcers and beat writers would talk about. How did he fall out of favor so badly?
A lot of it was injuries. If you look at Doug Martin, his best season was 2015.
Mm-hmm.
He was the second leading rusher in the NFL. The season you had injuries, and towards the end of the season, there was a suspension for controlled for some substance. I'm not sure what it was. He came back. He served the suspension, got himself in physical shape, and just when it came time to play, he didn't have it. He didn't have that burst. He couldn't hit the hole like he had used to. I mean, if you go back and look at film from 2015 and you compare it to what you saw last year, it's night and day comparison. Yeah. So, unfortunately, he just was not productive, and the Bucs just decided to move on from him and go a different direction.
Yeah, I've always had the opinion that running backs have so many carries in themselves. And if you
except Barry Sanders.
Yeah, except Barry Sanders. But if you give them the ball so many times, they hit that wall. This is the maximum number of carries my body can take. Going back to college, and I can't do it anymore. And all of them just seem to drop off the face right after that happens.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I love Doug Martin. I thought Doug Martin was great, and just the injuries that he couldn't put together a string of productive seasons, consecutive productive seasons, and that's unfortunate that happened to him. Great person, and it's just the way the NFL is, and so go ahead.
I'm sorry, Gene. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think, and here again, this is some of this hard knocks access, maybe. Once he served his suspension from the PEDs, I believe, at the beginning of the season last year, correct?
Right, that is correct.
Once he served, as you said, he never came back from that.
No.
As I said earlier, he was still Doug Martin, but everybody at this level is good. You've got to be a little bit better than good.
Right. And so, so what they've done right now is they've really revamped that offensive line, and they're hoping that, Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones, Jacquizz Rodgers, and they even have Charles Sims back from last year. They re-signed him for a season. So it's going to be really interesting to see. There will be running back by committee, and you can you heard it right here. That's pretty much how it's going to go. There's not going to be a 3-down back out there. It's going to be running back by committee this season. So that's
pretty much the entire NFL, though. It really is.
Yeah, and I think it increases the life of a running back, just being able to not have to deal with that not being that 3-down back, but being able to come in and be a change of pace back. So
not just the life, but also the effectiveness as well. I mean, you look at Mark Ingram as the Saints run. Yeah, I told you it was going to fall, didn't I?
I know you did. You hit it. That's why.
Yeah, I know. You look at the effectiveness of Mark Ingram during the 1,000-yard season of 2 years ago, as opposed to how effective he was being spelled off by Alvin Kamara last year.
Oh, that was psychological. That was totally just knowing you have another person out there that can carry the load and it's not all on you. That totally changes your mindset when you go out there and play.
Okay, last question I've got for you. And I've noticed this when I'm looking at your screenshot here. I've got to ask you, what's your favorite uniform the Buccaneers have worn? Because I see the Buccaneer pirate in the flag. I see the flag from the Super Bowl years, and I see the alarm clock uniforms they've got on now. So I've got to ask you, what's your favorite uniform?
Alarm clock.
Oh, yeah. God, those numbers are Stephanie's alarm clocks. I'm just telling you. I had one, so I know.
It's going to be crazy, and I know I'm a glutton for punishment, but the creamsicle is and always will be my favorite. I have so many memories of going to the old stadium, the Houlihan Stadium in Tampa, and that was when you could use pack the cooler and take it into the stadium and sit in those metal bleacher seats and burn your cards and watch the game.
Oh, the old, the big sombrero. The big sombrero, as Chris Berman used to call it.
I loved the orange uniforms.
The creamsicle?
Yeah. Push-up orange.
Yeah.
There you go.
Of course, I live out in the country. It may not be push-up orange for city people like y'all, but,
Man, those are delicious. I wish I had one right now.
Yes, indeed. It's only 175 degrees at 10 o'clock at night. So, yeah.
So, guys, I have to ask you guys, and this is something that I definitely would take back to our listeners. What is your expectations for this team, just based on what they were able to accomplish with a very solid draft, a good free agency class, and it doesn't hurt to have a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback.
Oh, he's talking about us. I thought he was talking about Tampa Bay.
The expectations are NFC Championship or Super Bowl. I'll be dead honest.
I agree.
It's to get past the divisional round. We're kind of stuck at the divisional round right now. We lost in 2011 to the 49ers. 2013 we lost to the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle, and then last year, the Minnesota Miracle, we lost in the last 10 seconds against the Vikings in the divisional round. So we want to host, get one of the top 2 seeds, so we're hosting more playoff games. But we want to get at least the NFC Championship game, if not back to the Super Bowl. That's really where the bar is set right now. Like you said, we have a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's going to be turning 40. He is still playing at an elite level. But how many more years can you get out of your Hall of Fame quarterback at 40? I know the Patriots are facing the same thing with Tom Brady. Of course, because he plays in a softer league. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry about that. Because he plays in the AFC, He's had more opportunities to go to the Super Bowl, but it's the same thing for Drew Brees. We need to get another championship while we still have Drew Brees, because who knows what the future is going to be after that. So that's the expectations. We've made moves on defense. You've got a more focused Marcus Williams at safety, who wants to do more of this instead of what we saw in the last 10 seconds of the divisional game. And you've got just a team that feels like they left things unfinished last year. And I know you can't ever take what happened last year and just assume it's going to happen the same way again this year. Just like your theme, you're not the same 5-11 team. We're not the same 11-5 team. We really aren't. We are
the likelihood of going on an 8-game winning streak in the middle of the season again is highly, highly unlikely.
Not with this schedule.
No.
So in the middle of the season, we have Baltimore, who we've never beaten under Drew Brees. Minnesota, those are both on the road. We host the Rams. We go to Cincinnati, then we play Philadelphia and Atlanta Thanksgiving night. So those are all huge games right there in the middle of the season. So it's important that we get off to a fast start. And then when we hit that rough stretch in the middle of the season, we've got to be in a good position that we can – our season's not made or broken in October and early November. Yeah. We want to be able to be in a good position rolling into the last month of the season, December, because we play the Panthers twice. We go to you guys December 9th. And we also have Pittsburgh 2 days before Christmas. So, that's –
And guys, just keep in mind, there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then.
Exactly.
So, injuries occur. There's so many. I mean, there's so many moving parts with the NFL. You never know what can happen with all these hokey new rules that they have. Somebody could get suspended for targeting or something. It's crazy. Just crazy things can happen and totally change the complexion of your schedule. So you just got to take those games one day at a time and one game at a time, and just kind of. Because I keep getting that from people. Oh, that Tampa has the toughest schedule in the NFL, or the second, I believe, the first or second toughest schedule in the NFL. Mm-hmm. These are teams that you saw last year. Yeah. And very few of those teams have retained every single person from the previous year. And again, anything can happen that would change the outlook on some of these games. You just got to go out there and play them.
Well, like they always say, it's not about who you play; it's when you play them. Exactly. That's the key point of any season.
We have a 16-game schedule, and of those 16 games, half of them are against teams that were in the NFL playoffs last year. Now, granted, 2 of those will be against Atlanta, 2 of those will be against Carolina, but 8 of our games are against playoff teams. And, to just mail it in that you're going at least 11-5, that would be ludicrous. You just, at this point, especially in the NFC South, you've got to maintain pace with whoever's leading the pack. And if you're leading the pack, you got to put as much distance as you can, because 2 or 3 weeks during the season can make or break your season.
I've got a name for you to watch when we play you guys on opening day. And you should know who this guy is, because he comes from around the Tampa Bay area. The Central Florida product, Traquan Smith, the wide receiver. He is turning a lot of heads in camp. He is showing great speed, fantastic hands, and he's really pairing up well with Drew Brees. There's talk that he could be your number 2 guy by the first part of the season. So
we're talking about different players. I have to ask you about my guy that Tampa should have drafted, but they didn't. I'm going to leave it alone. But Rankins, how's he doing?
I'm sorry, who was it?
Rankins.
Oh, Rankins. He is also having a great camp. There are reports that there are some plays where he is just unblockable on one-on-one situations. So you're seeing a lot of growth out of him. And there's another guy who we drafted in 2016, David Onyemata, came from Canada, had very little football knowledge, and he is growing up quickly to be a disruptive defensive lineman. So, it's not just Rankins. You're going to see a lot of growth out of both of these guys.
That's one thing that I was probably the biggest takeaway that I had from the preseason game the other night was just how deep our defensive front. Now, granted, it's the first preseason game of the year. Injuries could happen. Anything can happen between now. I'm talking about for this team at this point. What really struck me Thursday night was how deep this defensive line unit really looks to be right now. I mean, obviously you got Cam Jordan, who didn't even see action against Jacksonville, but then you have, coming off of the injury of a year ago, Alex Okafor. You have Sheldon Rankins. You have Trey Hendrickson, who was one of our draft picks out of that class last year. You have Davenport, who is yet to see any action as well. Kikaha. You've got all of these different guys that seem, at least at this point, to be trending up all at the same time. And that, like you said about your guys, and, Gene, you and I have talked about this before. The game of football is determined at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
You win with your offensive line or you win with your defensive line. All the other things out there going on have to happen and are really cool to watch and all that, but the game is won or lost right there at the line of scrimmage. As an offense, if you can't impose your will on that defense, you're not going to do anything and you're not going to score any points. And conversely, on defense, if you can't pressure that quarterback, it doesn't matter if you have the best 4 defensive backs in the league playing secondary. That's still one of the best quarterbacks in the world, and he's going to pick you apart if he has enough time.
Absolutely.
I really like the direction that the Saints have gone with that defensive, that front 7, not just the defensive linemen, but also with the quarterbacks. Coming off of injury is going to be Klein, is going to be Teo, is going to be Anzalone from a year ago. And we brought in the leading tackler in the league from a year ago from the Jets, Demario Davis. Don't want to make anybody nervous, but the last time that we imported something from the Jets, it ended up being a Lombardi. That was a guy named Vilma. But I make a joke out of that. But in all seriousness, Demario Davis could very easily fit into that mold and be that type of impact player that Vilma was at that time for this team.
I'd still like to get Levante David from the Buccaneers, so I'll tell you what. I'd like to get him from you guys.
I'd like for him to be anywhere but on the other side of the ball from our offense.
It's really crazy just how underrated he is. And I think it all goes back to wins and losses. But just a lot of people do not know who he is. Quan Alexander, another guy that outside of the NFC South, a lot of people don't know who he is. So, again, those are guys. Hopefully, with more wins comes more notoriety. So something to look forward to as well.
Gene, if you remember the last time you had me on your show during the winter/spring, I think it was pre-draft that I was on with you guys. Who was the one player that I told you? You asked me a pointed question. What concerned me most about our team whenever I saw y'all on the schedule? What name did I tell you?
Levante David.
That's it. Gerald McCoy was second.
Yeah. Yeah. So, hopefully that all stands up. Again, the Saints versus the Bucs is going to be a good benchmark to see where Tampa really is. It's because the games count. No more preseason. This is the first game of the season. This really gives you a great idea of how far this team has progressed or what they need to do to improve. So this is one of those games that normally I'm usually griping because we had to, the Bucs had to face the Saints, but this is one of those times I'm actually looking forward to it just to see where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in the grand scheme of things.
And then when we play you again, it's near the end of the season. So, that's a long stretch to sit there and say, okay, this is where we were and this is where we are now. So it's
and a lot can
change. Yep, a lot can change between now and then.
Sure can. Gene, we want to thank you for joining us tonight, man. Absolutely. We always enjoy having you on here. You're such a great guest to have. How can our people follow you and your work?
Oh yeah, you can reach me on me on Twitter.
He had to get the belt out to announce his follow info. Had to bring the belt on.
Yeah, you can reach me at super heavyweight. I love talking football. It doesn't matter what team. Just follow me. I'll follow you back. You can find me on iTunes, Buck What You Heard podcast. You can find me on YouTube, Buck What You Heard. So I love talking football. I love talking wrestling just as much. If you can't already guess. And SummerSlam coming up this weekend too. Just had to throw that out there.
And on that note, in all honestness and sincerity, R.I.P. Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
Yeah, that was sad.
I actually know who that is too.
He was actually a former NFL player.
Yeah, I keep telling Sean he's got the wrong Ulrich. You got to get my brother on here. That's the wrestling guy.
The most poignant picture that I saw over the course of the entire day yesterday was a picture taken in the ring. And you know how they put these filters on these photos, and the entire photo will be black and white except for one little spot that'll be in color. It was a picture of the Hart Foundation that was all in black and white, and Bret Hart was in the center holding his hands up like this, and he was in color. And the caption read, "And then there was one." And I didn't realize until then that all of them had passed away except for Bret.
Yep. Owen. Yeah. It's sad.
Owen, Anvil, Davey Boy, and Brian. All of them gone.
That's sad.
Alan's sitting there going, "What in the hell are they talking?"
No, actually, no. Again, you're going far enough back that I do know who these people are. I knew who the Hart Foundation is. I know who a lot of these guys are. That's that's the old WWE, and then Mid-South Wrestling era, which I know more than Mid-South. The wrestlers I remember, Junkyard Dog, the Iron Sheik. Back when they play in the old St. Bernard Civic Center and things like that, it was only 3 rows of chairs. It hadn't become all Hollywood yet. I mean, Dusty Rhodes, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Hacksaw Butch Reed. I mean, those are the guys that I knew. But my brother was the one, my brother and my dad. They're the ones that got into the wrestling once it got to be MTV and the wrestling stuff kind of merged together. And, Vince McMahon became, well-known and that kind of stuff. That's when, that's when my brother started really getting into the wrestling stuff. The first few WrestleManias, I don't know if he still has it or not, but he used to have a collection of videotapes. He had every WrestleMania from starting at WrestleMania 1. He had taped them all on VHS videotape. Now, I first look at it, I'm a football guy. I'm like, damn, how'd you get the Super Bowls all on tape? That's wrestling. Oh, my God.
You don't know what you were missing.
I know.
Hey man, I went to a local church. Well, I say local, down in the area where I grew up, 50, 60 miles away. Went to a church one day, and their guest speaker was Ted DiBiase.
See, I know who he is too.
Well,
I remember Ted DiBiase.
He's now a evangelist, and he was telling his life story, and he seemed quite impressed with me because I was stood over there to the side while he was signing autographs, and I'm going, man, do you remember back in blah 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 when the Fabulous Freebirds jackknifed you on the floor next to the ring on the concrete in Atlanta on WTV? And he looked at me and he said, man, how old are you?
Like Bruiser Brody. Me and my grandmother went to go see him. And I remember he took her popcorn and threw it on the ground. He snatched it out of her hand and threw it on the ground because he was a bad guy at the time. And she was cussing at him, and she was giving him the finger and all this other stuff. But, you know, after the match, he came up and they talked, and it was really cool. You know, that was when wrestling, when they were hitting each other with wooden chairs and stuff. I mean, it was kind of cool.
Well, you know,
see, that's what happens when you talk WWE. Vince McMahon kills your feed.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you know, back in the day, remember Dusty Rhodes had all the scar tissue on his forehead because he would cut himself, you know, for the blood. You know, and that was a big thing for him back then. So, like I said, I'm not completely ignorant of wrestling, but that's definitely my brother's era. So you have to get my brother on here one time. He'll enjoy talking wrestling.
There you go. It'll be fun.
He used to buy all the magazines too. That was a funny story involving those magazines.
I went to WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. That was my reward for completing all of my my radiation and my chemo treatments. My sister took me down there, and we got to go to the Mid-South Anniversary Fan Fest, where we got to meet guys and meet and spend the day, eat breakfast, spend the entire day, eat dinner, and then hang out with during the live event that they hosted that night with a new wrestling promotion with Jim Cornette, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Greg the Hammer Valentine,
Harley Race.
No, Harley wasn't there. But I mean, all these people that were foundational for the Mid-South promotion during the 70s. Mr. Wrestling #2 was there. Dark Journey, Kamala.
Wow, you're going way back.
Yeah. You should see Kamala now, man. He's in really, really, really bad shape. Yeah. He's had both of his legs amputated from diabetes.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned it, and we really have to get the air now, but I mean, it's funny that you mentioned.
We've gone into a completely different podcast now.
I know, but it's funny you mentioned all these old wrestlers and how young they pass away. And I'm just thinking about the Von Erichs, and that's going way back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So many of them died at a young age, and people, you know, yeah, it's all bullshit. It's all fake. It's all scripted. The thing is, though, they really do a lot of their own stunts. They are, you know, the jumps and the falls and all that stuff, and that does take a toll on their bodies. And you know, especially in the 70s, they were doing steroids a lot of times so they can get back for the matches again. Because, yeah, you know, they got to. Everybody knows there's a steel plate underneath those old rings, you know, so it made that loud noise when you hit and it stopped. So, and all that kind of stuff. But you're still, you know, you're coming down with all your weight on your joints and hitting that stuff. And that's why these guys end up in the shape they end up in. And it really is. It's a shame that so many of these wrestlers die at a young age as they do.
I'll tell you one better. Kerry Von Erich which
Yeah,
I believe was one of the younger of the brothers.
Yeah.
He wrestled in the WWE under the name the Texas Tornado. His entire time that he was wrestling in the WWE, or excuse me, at that time it was WWF promotion, he was doing it on a prosthetic leg because he had been in a motorcycle wreck and had his leg was amputated just below his knee.
Wow.
Most people don't know that.
That's unbelievable. Well, thank you again, Gene, for joining us on the show. And of course, we'll talk. Like I said, y'all got to get my brother on here. Maybe I'll just get him to come on and show special Under the Dome podcast, wrestling edition. You can get my brother on here. My brother, you think I know a lot of football? You get my brother talking about wrestling. Oh my God, he's an encyclopedia of all the. He could tell you the matches. He could tell you when one guy is a good guy, then a bad guy, and a good guy again. Y'all would love it. Y'all would really enjoy that. So get him on here.
It's called Babyface and Heel. Gene, thank you so much for being with us tonight, man. It's always a good time when you're
I really appreciate it.
You're going to hang out with us on the season kickoff show too, as well, aren't you?
That is correct. Yeah, I was invited. I'll definitely be there to talk about something. I'll have.
I'm gonna have to get my belt for that night.
Well,
yeah, I've got the actual. The Ric Flair one is my favorite. I don't really break that out too much, but
when I went to WrestleMania, the one souvenir that I wanted to take home, I didn't care about programs. I didn't care about autograph. The one souvenir that I wanted that white bordered intercontinental title belt.
That is a cool belt.
Like the Ultimate Warrior wore to the ring against Hulk Hogan. I said, and I took enough money and I walked up there to the counter and I looked at it. I looked at my sister and I said, I got enough money to buy this. She said, you better ask it if it can cook because your wife ain't going to cook for you if you spend that much money on that. And the reality of the situation hit me very clearly when she started talking about food. So needless to say, I didn't get the IC belt, but maybe one day.
Yeah, someday it'll happen. Well, guys, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And thanks for being on the show, Gene, as always. We'll see you for the kickoff show on September 8th.
Yep. Sounds fun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
All right. And we're down to the last couple minutes of the show, even though we've gone on longer than we normally do.
According to my monitor, I've been off air the whole night, so I should have a little bit of time to spare.
Well, that means your section, nobody saw you, nobody heard you. It's just going to be Gene and I talking the whole time, and Gene answering questions from some unknown person. That's all I can think.
Observing awkward moments of silence. Awesome.
Exactly.
Let's see. What do we need to cover real quick? As I heard someone suggest earlier this week, guys, it's just the preseason. It's one game. Taysom Hill is not fixing to start wearing number 9. If you think that Taysom Hill is going to back up Drew Brees, look at the opening kickoff. If he's down there shagging that kick, he ain't the backup. Anyway, September 8th, 7 p.m. start time, which is an hour prior to our normal start time, and it will be on a Saturday, as is our tradition here. The third annual season kickoff show. Guys like Gene Thomas, who was just with us, Josh Schultz, our guest a week ago, Corey Lashney from the Carolina Panthers. We're going to have an NFC South roundtable. Just kind of discuss the upcoming season and everything all together as one. Also, prior to that, the first half of the show, our very special guest is going to be former Saints middle linebacker Jolon Dunbar. And
Yes.
On my Monday motivation loop, I have that Reggie Bush play now.
Oh, you found it? Okay.
Yeah.
Because when he comes on, I'm definitely introducing him to that play, that the kickoff, I mean, the punt return, where you hear Mike Tirico, "That's one, there's two," and hopefully I can get it on long enough where I can get to Ron Jaworski going, "And it's a decleater," because that was probably one of the best punt return blocks. It's totally illegal now. Complete blindside block where,
if he did that now, they'd have him on the firing squad on the sidelines.
You wouldn't be able to see the field anymore. There'd be so much yellow on the field. But it was one of the best hits. You dream of a hit like that as a special teams player and a linebacker, that you can just look up somebody and just pop them into next week on a clean blindside hit.
See, back in the day, you could kind of, especially on special teams, when you were using the entire field, you could go way over to the side and kind of pick your spot and sneak up on somebody that wasn't looking at you and just absolutely introduce them to their ankles.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so great for like highlight reel stuff. But nowadays, as we said, that would never happen. But there's a lot more to Jolon Dunbar and his career in New Orleans than simply one play, and we're going to get into all of that on the kickoff show. We have a Friday. I won't get to see the game live on Friday night. I have a men's group fish fry that I have to attend. Unless I can find somebody that's broadcasting it on my cell phone, I won't get to see it as it happens. But,
Well, it's one of those games I think you're going to see, and we'll just talk a little bit about it before we go up the air. I think it's one of those games where, once again, I doubt Drew Brees plays. If he does play, he plays one series. It's really game 3 that's the important game. I like to see Taysom Hill go ahead and try and start this one, though. I like to see him play with the first team and see if he has progressed at all as a quarterback. It doesn't matter, once again, whether we win or lose. But here's the thing, though. The Arizona Cardinals have 4 quarterbacks on their roster, including, I believe, Josh Allen. No, not Josh Allen.
Rosen.
Rosen, thank you. They've got Rosen on the team.
Allen's in Buffalo.
Right. So you've got Rosen, you've got Sam Bradford, and you have Mike Glennon on that team. And I believe they've got one other quarterback on there too. A lot of people who are kind of like, Tom Savage sucks, Tom Savage shouldn't even be on this team. Let's watch the Arizona quarterbacks closely, because if the Cardinals feel that Rosen has progressed enough that they can go with Sam Bradford, with the idea of pulling Bradford and playing Rosen, Mike Glennon might be somebody that they are willing to part with in that big cut. Remember, there's one cut again this year at 75, goes from 75 people and 90 players, I think, down to the 45.
53.
53. But it goes to that big cut. That is a player I can see the Saints possibly going after, because they had some interest in Glennon before. If they feel that Savage just has not progressed up, they feel confident enough for him to be the number 2 guy. So it's something worth watching. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's going to happen or anything like that.
I watched Sav in that Jacksonville game the other night, and there was an astute friend of mine that pointed out to me that I said, "Man, Sav must be nervous. He's erratic." And This friend told me, no, his technique sucks. He's not setting his feet. He's throwing all with his arm. That's why he looks erratic. And I watched him the next 3 passes that he threw, and I was going, wow, I was an offensive player, and I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, he wasn't shifting his weight forward at all.
No, he wasn't stepping into his throws.
No, he was very nervous. He was stepping out of the plays, throwing off his back foot. He was not shifting his weight forward when he threw, and you could see that. That's part of the reason why that screen pass looks so terrible with Alvin Kamara. He did not. Yeah. If you watch Drew Brees, and this is the Saints had trouble running the screen when Aaron Brooks was quarterback too. But if you watch Drew Brees, he always squares his shoulders off when he throws. Always. I've never seen a guy do what he does. What he does, he manages to square his body off every time and throw the ball. And that consistency is what we just take for granted. Yeah. And you just did not see that with Savage, early in the game. Once he kind of got into a groove, then he got more comfortable, and you started seeing him, step into the throws, shift his weight forward, push that ball out with his whole body, because your hips and your torso generate the torque. It's not all arm. If you just throw all arm, you're not going to get a consistent spiral. You're not going to get a consistent release point. But if you get that torque that you can generate with your body, where you shift your weight forward and then let it go, then you're going to see a much more consistent throw, and you see a good release point, and that's the consistency you're looking for in a passing game. So
I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that Savage is going to be mistaken for Drew Brees at all on the field. Mm-hmm. But I think by the same token, I do believe that Savage is getting a bad rap, because if you go back and you look at his career at Houston, it wasn't just that quarterback, Watson, and J.J. Watt that got hurt. That team went from being a contender to a virtual dumpster fire almost overnight. It was not an ideal situation for a backup to be stepping into. Now, all that being said, I think that Savage quite possibly could have been nervous going into this Jacksonville game. I think that he, as you said, he overcame that and he leveled off, and he did not play bad at all.
He did what he needed to.
Yeah. He's not supposed to come in there and pass for 200 yards in a preseason game. By the same token, I'm just going to give my 2 cents on Taysom Hill, and you can address your hate mail for my response to our Facebook page. But you guys wondered what Tim Tebow would look like in a New Orleans Saints uniform. He would have worn number 7, because Taysom Hill is a right-handed version of Tim Tebow. He's a novelty act. He's a hard worker. He's an athlete. He's going to give you 1,000% of everything that he has to bear, everything that he brings to bear. He's going to give you on that field, but he is not an NFL starter quality quarterback. He's just not. And there's no amount of study, practice, education, film, none of that is going to change him from what he is to what you want him to be. Serviceable, possibly. Everything's serviceable until everybody in the league sees it and figures out how to stop it.
Well, he's 28 years old. People forget that because he's only been in the league for a couple of years. But he's 28 years old because he did he went to BYU. He's a Mormon. He did
he did the
I don't know what where you ride on a bicycle. Yeah, the mission. Yeah, where you put the bicycle helmet on, put the white shirt on, the black pants, ride the bike, and tell everybody about the Book of Mormon. But
have you heard the good news?
Yes, he did the mission. So he is an older player. That's why I want to see him with the first team. I want to see where he has to go through his progressions. He makes his reads and he throws the ball. What we saw a lot of, and it's partially because he wasn't playing behind the number one offensive line. He would make one read. If it wasn't there, tuck it down and run with it. And he's faster than most of those guys that are going to be come September are going to be back to the jobs as delivery men or practice squad players or whatever it was they were doing, whatever else they're going to do outside of football. When he's playing against NFL athletes who are just as fast as he is, I'd like to see him not run the ball, make his progressions, do his reads, and get rid of that ball as quickly as he can. I want to see the consistency in his mechanics, consistency in his arm strength, his release point, all that stuff. I want to see the good touch passes, and then when he has to uncork it and throw it deep, he can do it. That's the kind of stuff I want to see, because that's how you judge whether or not he is ready to be a backup quarterback and want something you're going to develop into a legitimate either career backup or a starter. That's what we need to see. You don't see that with him playing behind second and third teamers. He needs to be in that position so we can see where he is right now and whether or not there really is a future for him with the team. And that's all I'm looking for in the second preseason game. And of course, I'm looking for the development on the defense too. I'd like to see them do a much better job, be much better tacklers than they were. I thought the tackling stunk last week. So let's see how it goes.
When you run live practice with no contact, you're going to wind up seeing what you saw Thursday night. You're going to have guys that don't tackle well. I forget which one. I swore I had that memory seared into my conscious being the other night. But there was one guy, number 50-something. He missed like 5 or 6 arm tackles.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sean Payton even addressed that in a press conference post-game where he said, hey, guys, this is a game where the guys, the first time they were doing live tackling and bringing to the ground. Even the padded practice, I went to the practice on Sunday, even the padded practice, they just wrap up, blow the whistle, and stop. They don't really actually tackle and bring people down to the ground because you don't want to get people hurt. And that's the nature of football these days. You don't have the tackling drills. They don't run the Oklahoma drills. They don't do those things that we know that they used to do back in the day because these guys are so built, and I don't want to say fragile because that's not the right word, but their bodies, their bodies, you just don't want to take the chance of having, two guys. You don't want Kamara and Demario Davis in the Oklahoma drill. Who's going to bring the other guy down? You just don't do that anymore, and that's what they used to do back in the day, because back in the day, they didn't have year-round conditioning and didn't have OTAs and didn't have all those things. These guys used training camp to get into shape. And you got into shape by hitting people, by tackling, and you just don't see that today anymore. It's just not going to happen.
No,
So
they expect you to. Well, football has become such of a year-round job now that you don't really necessarily have to worry about getting out of shape because you're doing something the entire calendar year as opposed to 6 or 8, 9 months out of the year. We got to get off of here before they kill us.
Exactly. I'll just tell you, I watched Drew Brees do more stretches unlike anybody else on the team. Every time he wasn't on the field running plays and stuff, he was stretching, constantly stretching. So, he's got his own routine. Thank you guys for sticking with us this long. As usual, when we have a guest, we always want to start talking Saints football after the guest leaves. Y'all stuck with us for another 45 minutes. Oh, my God. All right. Thank you once again for sticking with us. We'll talk about the preseason game against the Cardinals next week. And don't forget to join us on September 8th for the kickoff show. Until next time, thank you for joining us under the dome. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.